welcome to everybody here at, this is Carlos Moreno at centerdivision.com. I wanted to welcome everybody. We're doing a little interview today with Natasha, who's taken some classes in the online group class. Natasha, I was going to have people, you had an interesting experience that I wanted. It's actually a fairly common experience from my end, but most clients don't get to see it as often. So I wanted you to kind of relate that, your experience there. Maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about yourself, just kind of the history of you using glasses, what your vision has been like, and what your eyesight had been like, and got you to the point where you took classes with me.
Yeah, so I'm Natasha. I just turned 36 recently, and I started wearing glasses the summer after third grade. And I wore glasses. That was actually considered fairly late for my family. I think my sister was in middle school when she got glasses, and that was like a family record. So definitely poor vision was the expectation in my family growing up, not a surprise. And I got contacts in seventh grade. And I was wearing contacts pretty consistently through, I guess, like a month and a half ago. My prescription got worse from contacts to glasses, and like once with the contacts, but then was fairly stable after that. But I just have become increasingly intolerant of wearing the contacts. And my vision is about -4 and -4.5 in the contacts. And that's where it's been for many years. But I got really tired of wearing the contacts, and my eyes were always feeling irritated, even with a new pair. And I was just reading something randomly online, someone who I'm not familiar with talking about improving their vision. And I was like, wait, what? I need to know more about this, because I'm definitely someone who's I don't know, saying I'm into health sounds kind of strange, but just into like I'm into, I think that people naturally should be in a state of health, and that there are things we can do. And so I was like, well, if anyone is going to know something about this, I'm really into the Weston A. Price Foundation. And that's actually how I found you. Is I was like, I am going to search, because if this is for real, if people who believe you can heal cavities say that this is for real, then like I trust them. And so I searched at Weston A. Price natural vision improvement, and I found, I think it was a podcast that you'd done, or an interview. I was looking at it, the text, not the audio. I was like, well, wow. Like, I'm familiar with these people, and I trust a lot of what they have to say. So I think there's probably something to this. And so that's how I looked up your website and found out about the intro classes.
The Weston A. Price Foundation has the Wise Traditions podcast, and they've got hours and hours and hours of great interviews and information on there. So that is a really great source.
Right. Yeah. So I'm really into the nourishing traditions and Sally Fallon Morell and the whole Weston A. Price Foundation. So that's how I found out about it. And I was like, well, if they say that if this is on there, I'm gonna try it, because I really trust these people and follow a lot of their things. And so that's how I signed up for the group class, the intro class, and then the group class, and then the experience you're referring to. It was the second or third time I was in the group?
I think it was the third time. Yeah. Usually I tell people, so the primary thing that I'll tell people when they're getting into the group class or the private class is to pay attention to relief, just feeling more relaxed. I knew you had experienced that you would feel more comfortable when we were doing some of the Bates techniques that we were covering. But then on the third class, something happened.
Yeah, so we were practicing with the letter sheets, and at first, actually the smallest text, the first times to read it, I was about here. My hand wasn't fully extended. So we're looking at like 5 or 6 inches is where I could read the small text, and things were a little bit further out, and we were practicing the shifting across the page. And then all of a sudden I realized that I could actually read some of the lower down text that I absolutely couldn't see out at a further distance, like where the computer screen was. And that was really, really incredible for me, because it was proof that it really can happen. And after that, actually, after that call was over, I went and found my husband. I was like, you have to listen to me. I can read this. I don't like holding the, he has perfect eyesight. He was like, he was happy for me. I was holding the page like out, 11 or 12 inches. And I was reading the text that I'd been 5 or 6 inches in to read. And I was crying talking to him because it was so cool to see that, to actually experience that, and know that it's possible.
Which, since we were in a group class too, I was telling somebody that when I'm working with a group of people, because I was aware something was going on with you because your face was getting emotional. You were shifting, and you were surprised at what you were seeing, and I could see the emotion coming up. And so I just kind of let you go for a little bit so that you could have the experience. And then I said, Natasha, what's happening? And then you were even like choked up, but you were, and I remember you saying something like, even though you had hoped that it would work, you were surprised that it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, you always read people say, oh, this worked for me, or hear them, and it's like, okay, well, it didn't really, and when you actually experience it for yourself, even something that might seem inconsequential, like to someone who already has perfect eyesight, saying, okay, well, you can read the paper over here, big deal. But when you're used to being like, okay, I can read right here, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And that you probably hadn't had your vision like that since you were a kid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the reason that they took me to go get my eyes checked is we were driving down the road, I was in the back seat, and I said, oh, look at that helicopter. My parents were like, helicopter? There's no helicopter. I was looking at a water tower.
Oh.
And I couldn't see the legs on the water tower. And they were like, okay, well, it's time to go get your eyes checked.
There's something off here. Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. It had been a while since any text because that was a smaller text. I can read big text out here, but to read the smaller text out here.
Just so that everybody knows, so you're nearsighted, so you have myopia, where things are easier to read really close to your face, but as stuff gets further and further from your face, and it's not even necessarily like across a room or out on the road, it's just something that's out a few feet away, can be less distinct.
Yeah, typically for me, when I was just reading a book, say, there was usually a point about 5 or 6 inches away, because I would read at night without any contacts or anything, about 5 or 6 inches, where I felt comfortable that it wasn't too close, but I could still read, was like a normal book text reading distance for me, and unable to read it much further than, say, like 8 inches or so.
Do you remember what the emotion was when you started seeing things clearly? Like, what was it what was the emotional feeling that came up when?
I don't know. I don't know if I could pick an exact single word. Like amazement,
more than one.
Yeah, like when, happy crying, it was just like a bunch of emotions. Sorry, I don't have this particular one exact word, just sort of.
And also, so that people know, it wasn't that your vision cleared up to that point and then you were done. Like, your vision isn't normal yet.
Right. Now I have noticed, which is really cool. It can be hard. It's like anything, if someone is trying to lose weight or whatever, 1 pound, like it doesn't maybe seem like much, or if you're trying to, walk, like whatever the goal is, the little steps sometimes aren't as visible to you, but they're definitely there. And so I've noticed when I was checking to see how far away, after I've been doing the shifting and things, I can read something. And I didn't have an exact tape measure, but yesterday I was reading that same thing, and it was at like 13 to 15 inches. I don't know exactly. It was several inches beyond. I held up a different sheet of paper, and it was a good distance beyond that sheet of paper. So everything out and about still seems indistinct to me, and I couldn't read something small text, or even a large text, very well from like across the room, but I can definitely now read that normal sized 12 font or whatever it is at an arm's length instead of all the way in, which is pretty cool. And it helps, I think, to realize those little, I know you suggested that I keep like a journal and record it, and I haven't done that because I keep losing my tape measure. But I think that's a good idea that you suggested, to really track how many inches or centimeters even, or whatever, so that you can see, because it is hard to tell and to feel like it's working when everything out there seems kind of fuzzy. But then when you can say, well, but I can see this at 13 inches.
Yeah.
And before it was 11, or before it was, that really does make a difference here.
Yeah. You could also practice with much bigger letters out in the world, like a stop sign has really big letters on it. And you could stand at a distance where they're kind of blurry, and then you could practice shifting there. You could practice with signs outdoors. You can get much bigger letters to practice with inside your house.
Yeah, I do have one of the big letter sheets up on my wall, and I can't see it very well from here, but I do have some big letters posted on the walls too.
Yeah. And so that's an important thing too, about the whole thing that you mentioned about continuing to work at something, because I'll tell people, for most people, this isn't like all of a sudden you couldn't see, or your vision was imperfect, and all of a sudden you can see. It does take work. You do have to practice at it. How do you feel comfortable with the amount of time that you put in and that you need to put in?
I wish I put in more. I want to, and I haven't made the time for it. I won't say found the time, because I'm sure I could, and I choose to do something else with the time. And I would like to practice more. And that's actually one of the things that I really appreciate about doing the classes, is I know that, like, okay, here's this time that I'm going to sit down and focus on this, because once I have a younger child, and once she goes to bed, it's like, okay, well, I have 2 hours to myself where I can do things. And it can be difficult to say, okay, well, I'm going to sit down and practice this. And it's also dark then, and during the day it can be difficult to sit down and do the palming without getting interrupted. But I have started doing the letter sheets like at lunch or something, while I'm waiting to her to finish eating. And because she just turned 4, and so she's practicing reading and letters, so I just tell her I'm practicing reading, and she's like, oh, okay. That makes sense. I'm practicing learning letters too. So I have found that way to work that part in there, at least.
That's good. That's really, really good.